Welcome to the SBI Podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Hello, SBI Podcast subscribers. My name is Scott Gruher. I am a partner with SBI, a sales and marketing consulting firm dedicated to helping you make your number. With me today is Ryan Tognazzini, a principal with SBI. You may know Ryan better as our magazine cover model. So one of our clients actually renamed him Magnazzini instead of Tognazzini. Thanks for the ammunition, Rob, if you're watching. Appreciate it. On this show, we discuss sales and marketing emerging best practices for viewers just like you, executives trying to grow their revenues. How's it going, Ryan?
I'm doing well. That's a handsome picture.
Oh, amazing.
All right, so on today's show, we're going to discuss a topic many functional executives think about but rarely discuss, which is how to be viewed as a strategic partner to the CEO and to the board of directors. And we talk to so many business leaders and functional leaders in organizations who tell us they want to be the CEO someday. If this is you, you're going to enjoy today's show. During the show, we're going to attempt to break down the functional silos and get the entire executive team focused on what really matters, which is creating shareholder value. If you're not a public company, at least creating value for the investors and the owners who own your organization. So let's jump in.
Let's do it. Ryan, you interact with CEOs, product marketing, sales, and HR leaders every day. What do you typically see them focused on?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing is they want to hit their goals. And, they want to get as many resources and as many dollars as they can in order to do it.
So let's talk about what that looks like by functional leader. What do you see?
Yeah, sure. So let's take a couple examples. So you got the product leader who wants more money to spend on R&D, so he or she can go out and build new products to bring to the marketplace. Mm-hmm. The marketing leader wants more money for things like demand generation efforts, optimizing the website, redoing the website, creative agencies, developing content, et cetera. And the sales leader wants more money to hire more reps, maybe pay them more money, because ultimately he believes, in a lot of cases, more reps give him a better chance of making the number. And lastly, you've got HR who wants things like learning and development resources, ways to help train their employees and help those employees develop.
Yeah, then the CEO is left there with only so much budget, and they don't know who to spread it around to, right? So everyone is focused on different initiatives. You need one common way to evaluate investments to make the right allocation decisions. Without it, budget goes to whoever can yell the loudest and be the most persuasive, and this causes massive friction between your functional peers.
Yeah, and so you think about it. I mean, we just talked about how each function is really focused on their own objectives, and this can make allocating budget difficult. I mean, it also makes for some internal tensions, right? So somebody gets, $1 here, and that means somebody else over here doesn't get the dollar. So, I mean, what if we could agree on one way where we're going to allocate those funds in order to grow our revenues and make our number? So what are some thoughts you've got on how to approach that?
Yeah, so there's two key metrics here. One is customer acquisition cost, also known as CAC, and customer lifetime value, or CLTV. These metrics are used heavily in organizations with software as a service offerings, but they haven't really been applied broadly to other industries, and certainly not at the right level of depth. Ryan, why don't you explain to our audience why customer acquisition cost is such an important metric?
Yeah, I mean, it matters because it factors in all of the costs that are required to acquire a new customer. So it allows you to break down the inputs that you can control and, that impact that cost. So as an example, are we spending too much to market a product? Are we selling through high-cost channels, and therefore we can't make our products profitable? And you can calculate the acquisition cost by understanding, really using a method we would call activity-based costing. So in simple terms, I mean, how much effort is exerted and spent, and the associated costs to acquire a new customer. So we'll come back to this concept a little bit later in the show, but just wanted to give a quick definition.
Interesting. So I know you interact with dozens of sales leaders. Do you typically see leaders in sales and marketing focused on lowering customer acquisition cost?
No. So a lot of times it's not tracked, or, the sales leader is laser focused on delivering revenue, so not thinking a lot about, overall costs. And to your point, if it is tracked, it usually is tracked in, software as a service businesses, where it's been sort of become very common. And in a lot of cases, it's not tracked at the right levels in order to make it actually actionable so that somebody can do something with it.
Okay, I know we're going to come back and tell our audience how to make it actionable, but I don't want to forget about CAC's kissing cousin, customer lifetime value. Looking at customer acquisition cost alone can be misleading, Ryan. So you also need to look at CLTV, or customer lifetime value, don't you?
CAC's kissing cousin.
Yeah, I went there.
Awesome. Yeah, so CLTV, as we would call it, is all about the average sales price and ongoing revenue stream you get from a customer and how long they stay with us. So if your acquisition cost is higher than your lifetime value, you've got issues there. So, the acquisition cost needs to be lower than your lifetime value. And it's a ratio here that really matters. So, as a benchmarker, to give the audience an idea here, some common ranges in SaaS is, you want your lifetime value to customer acquisition to be about 3 to 1. Which better said is, if you spend about $1 to acquire a customer, that spends 3 over the lifetime of their being a customer with you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good example. So let's dig into the example a little bit deeper. If I'm selling into the enterprise and my average sales price is $1 million, and we typically keep those customers and they spend about $3 million over their entire lifetime. In this case, you would be spending a lot more to acquire that customer. You would expect to, at least. Versus a transactional sale, Ryan, right, where the lifetime value is $50,000, your customer acquisition cost better be a lot lower, right?
Yeah, perhaps you only want to spend $10,000 or $20,000 to generate that customer. So if you're not measuring customer acquisition costs and lifetime value today, we highly recommend that you start. It's an illuminating process that can really help you identify areas where you're potentially misallocating people, time, and money in your business.
Yeah, and the key here, I think, is that it helps you illuminate those across functions, right? Not just within your own silo. So you can look and say, hey, maybe we should reallocate sales budget to marketing, or vice versa.
Exactly.
So we're going to take a short break here and discuss our free podcast with you. If you aren't already subscribed, we recommend you do. After the break, we are going to explore the impact of lifetime value on creating shareholder value for your organization.
Do you have too many things to do and not enough time to do them? Is finding time to learn best practices almost impossible? The SBI Podcast is your solution. Turn time spent exercising, commuting, and traveling into productive learning time with a subscription to the SBI Podcast. SBI Podcast listeners get unique insight into real-world sales and marketing issues through interviews with your industry peers every week. Find us on iTunes by searching for Sales Benchmark Index Podcast and subscribe today.
Welcome back. In the first segment, we discussed how functional leaders can elevate the conversation by discussing customer acquisition cost and lifetime value. So now let's take a minute and let's walk through an example of how having all the functional leaders focus on an improving customer acquisition cost and lifetime value can actually create some shareholder value for an organization.
All right, so I'm going to warn the audience, get ready for a minute. We're going to start talking about some numbers here, and I'm going to try to make sure I make this simple, right? Because I'm going to introduce some different concepts. Here are some of the metrics Value Corporation. For Value Corporation, we kept them very round to make this example simple. So if you're the head of sales at Value Corp, here's some of your metrics you're looking at. The average customer lifetime value currently is $1 million. So in this example, you're going to improve lifetime value by 6% per customer. So we'd add an additional $60,000 on the lifetime value per customer, as you can see on the screen. And we're going to project that Value Corp is going to acquire 100 new customers next year. So if we take that $60,000 increase and we multiply it down times the 100 customers they're going to acquire, that's $6 million in additional lifetime value, right? So if we then look at the market multiple, so what the market pays on revenue in that industry, and we say it's 10x for simplicity's sakes, you can actually point to this and say, we're going to create $60 million in shareholder value for the company. How about that, Ryan?
Hey, that's a phenomenal way to really demonstrate your value to the organization, as well as bringing, if you're bringing a new initiative and you're asking for funding there and you can demonstrate that you can create this amount of value, that's a no-brainer. Where'd the 6% assumption come from?
Yeah, let me explain where I got this from. So if we look at the revenue growth maturity model, right, which is on page 11 of your How to Make the Number in 2016 report, there are 5 levels. In this case, I was assuming that we're taking the company from level 2 to level 3. which, as shown by the data on page 14, means a 6% increase in lifetime value. Right, so that's how I got to the number.
So basically, you're saying you're creating $60 million in shareholder value just by improving how you increase the customer lifetime value. So, I mean, if I'm listening to this, I'm saying sign me up. So, if you can get me from a level 2 to a level 3, I mean, that's a big lift. Yeah. And what we've also found is that companies that are able to go from level 3 to level 4 are able to improve this by 13%. So now I'm at 13 million in additional revenue, or 130 million in value creation, and 4 to 5 is 26%. So we're talking about massive increases and improvements in shareholder value here.
Yeah, and if you can take this plan to the CEO or the board and show them how you can help generate this type of shareholder value, now it's a completely different conversation.
Yeah. And a lot of times we often see people that think that, a new sales process is going to save the day, or maybe putting some spiffs on the comp plan is going to improve results. And a lot of these are very tactical activities that aren't necessarily game changers. And so when it comes to creating shareholder value, the idea here is to think a little bit differently.
Yeah. And it's natural for leaders to point at quick fixes because they have a lot of demands and pressure on them.
Sure.
But if you're trying to really make sure the number gets made and you want to look like a strategic leader in front of the CEO and the board of directors, you have to elevate your thinking and think across functions, which customer acquisition costs and lifetime value help you do.
Yeah, and it's conversation like this that's going to really help get their attention. So we see executives really, really struggle sometimes with trying to balance short and long-term planning. And so you may be thinking to yourself, how is this going to help me make my number right now? And if you're struggling with this, you might want to spend some time, in your section of the Make the Number workbook. There's a lot of great questions in there that will help you kind of think through some of these things and whether or not you're on the right track. And if you're a sales leader, it's section 5. If you're a marketing leader, it's section 4. So, go and ask yourself the tough questions that will help answer some of those things where you can find ways to really drive that shareholder value through customer acquisition cost and lifetime value. All right, we're going to take a quick break and then wrap this discussion up with how to take some action. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Each day, you receive hundreds of emails, tons of text messages, countless telephone calls, and sit in too many meetings. How do you find ideas to make the number with all this noise? The SBI blog filters all this nonsense for you and presents only first-rate ideas to make the number. Simplify your life. Subscribe to one blog and read the best content. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com and subscribe today.
Now that we gave an example of how to drive shareholder value through lifetime value, let's talk about customer acquisition cost.
Yeah, it's important that while you're improving the lifetime value, you don't ignore customer acquisition costs. I mean, you need to keep that stable or decrease it over time while improving lifetime value. So in other words, if customers are spending more, you still want to try and keep your eye on mind the store, if you will, on customer acquisition cost.
Yeah, okay, Ryan. So we've talked a lot about how functional leaders should use CAC and LTV. So if I'm watching right now and I'm in the audience, how do I put this into action?
Yeah. So we talked about how functional leaders might want to shift their thinking to be seen as more strategic leaders by the CEO and by the board of directors. And many get stuck at the level of the functional goals. So I'm the sales leader, I got to make this number. But then we talked a little bit about why customer acquisition costs and lifetime value are such important things that the entire executive team should be considering, and how improving them really creates shareholder value. So as a functional leader, use shareholder value to articulate why you need more budget or resources to help you.
That's a great idea. That would really change the conversation. With that approach, the CEO is going to feel like you're really thinking about the impact on the business versus just trying to do a land grab like a lot of functional leaders. So Ryan, how should functional leaders go about calculating customer acquisition cost and lifetime value to enable this conversation with the CEO or the board of directors?
Yeah, so again, first and foremost, it's break down your acquisition costs using this activity-based costing method, which we referred to earlier in the show. And really, this requires each activity that marketing, sales, et cetera, performs to be labeled and allocated appropriately as, what are we spending towards acquiring a new customer from those groups?
Okay. So you mentioned activity-based costing, you touched on a little bit, but it sounds difficult. How would you do that?
Yeah, so first understanding which roles are involved in new customer acquisition in each department in this example. So, and the time spent, directly on those new customer acquisition efforts. So use tools like time studies, some data that you can pull, perhaps job shadowing, and determine which activities are related to, new customer acquisition. And then attach the value of the time that's spent to that to each of those activity levels. So when you add this up, you get the top portion of the equation, which is the numerator, which is your cost. And then you can divide that into the number of customers that you bring on.
Okay, interesting. Got it. So next is determining customer lifetime value. So how much do your customers spend, which is how much do your customers spend with you over their lifetime? What are the margins, and how much churn do you experience?
Yeah, and I think the additional complexity starts to come into play here when you begin to look at this at different levels. Yeah. And you can break CAC down and LTV down by different areas, so things like product or market or channel. The real key here is to take into consideration what we would call product channel fit. And I'll have you describe this for the audience here in a second, but there's really 5 cost buckets that you should think about in terms of product channel fit. So the first one is, what is it costing us to build it? What's it costing us to market it? What's it costing us to sell it? What's it costing us to install it? And then what's it costing us to support it? So why don't you give an example here for the audience?
So if you're going to build a new product and you need to determine which channel you're going to roll it out through, right? So for example, if I'm building a product and it's going to be an ancillary product that I'm going to sell to my same customers through the same channel of reps that already exist, that's a lower cost channel to bring that to market. If I'm going to build a product that's going to go to a brand new market, right? I might need a new sales force, a new marketing strategy to bring that to that market, and it could be a lot more costly. So when you look at, I'm going to design a product, you have to look at what channel you're going to sell it through and determine how that's going to impact customer acquisition, and then also what's that revenue stream going to look like, and how do those match up?
Yeah, and so, an example, a channel here as an example would be, we're going to use inside sales instead of field sales. And so we've got a lower cost resource who's helping us sell this new product in order to keep the acquisition cost down. That's why you see so many companies today really pushing inside sales up the stack, selling into billion-dollar companies in some cases. They're selling, maybe it's a $50,000 a year subscription service, and you can't afford to sell it through a high-cost channel like the field.
Yeah, and there's a lot of companies out there right now that are scrambling to move from selling perpetual license to selling a SaaS offering because they roll out the new product, they haven't aligned sales and marketing.
Yep.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about an example here from thinking about this from the expense for marketing.
Yeah, so from a marketing perspective, if we're going to go after a brand new market, we have to educate that market and make them aware of this new product, right? They don't know your company yet, per se. And then you're going to have to do a lot more campaigns and marketing activities to drive demand versus driving account-based marketing within your current customers who already know you. It's a completely different marketing strategy and should be less costly.
Yep. So, let's say you look at, acquisition cost by lead source. And, let's say you separate out your CAC and LTV and you look at, leads that are coming through from sales versus leads that are coming through from marketing. And, as you think about it, let's say, you find customers created through marketing and it costs you an average of $25,000 to acquire a customer who spends $100,000 over the course of their lifetime.
Okay.
Right, so you've got a 4-to-1 ratio in this case. But then let's say sales is also generating customers because marketing is not doing it all on their own. But it's costing them $50,000 to bring a customer in, and that customer is also spending $100,000 over their lifetime. Yeah. So now you're at a 2-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, so I'd be doubling down on marketing in that scenario, right? The math is there. And if you can drive more demand through marketing, why not? It's a 2-to-1 return as compared to driving it through sales.
Yeah. So, now you have a more efficient model of customer acquisition through the marketing channel. So just by knowing your acquisition costs and your lifetime value, you might look to shift some of your funds back to, marketing since they're actually, driving better results in this case. Now, there may be some diminishing returns and some other things you got to take into consideration here, but the simple fact is you have this level of awareness and, your expensive sales resources, maybe you can peel some of that time off, shift that back into marketing, and now you're allocating your people and your time and your money accordingly to drive up, not only lowering CAC, but potentially increasing LTV. And it all goes back to that shareholder value.
Yeah, so let's put a bow on this. If you can imagine that conversation, you walk into the CEO's office and say, hey, I did some analysis here, and we're paying twice as much to bring in a lead through sales as marketing. What if we shifted that time, right? And we gave more money to marketing so they could go drive more leads for sales, and this is the impact on the business? It's a pretty good conversation.
Yeah, I mean, one just final example here is, you see a lot of times where sales reps don't have enough leads. And so they're not at what some people would call capacity. And, you've got great A-player reps, and you can make your number with fewer reps, but you're adding more reps sort of on the street in order to make the number. So, I mean, potentially one option is, hey, why do I have so many heads in sales? Like, why don't we take those dollars, to your point, and move those dollars over to marketing? And hey, when the floodgates open, we can go hire some more reps who can convert those opportunities. But now you're starting to right-size the organization to the opportunities that exist.
All right, so good discussion. We are at a time for today's show. Thanks for joining Ryan and me. We've enjoyed it. If you enjoyed watching the show, I suggest you subscribe to SBI TV at salesbenchmarkindex.com/TV, or you can find us at our SBI YouTube channel. We have some outstanding guests and topics confirmed for future episodes that you will not want to miss. Until then, we wish you the best of luck in trying to make your number. So long.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.